Most Bigfoot sightings show a creature that's harmless, but one set of trail cam footage proves just how deadly he really is. Deep in the forest, my group of backpackers set up camp, completely unaware that in just moments we would be dragged screaming across the forest floor. My name is Mark, and I positioned the first trail camera on a thick Douglas fir approximately 40 yards from our planned campsite. The motion-activated lens faced the clearing where we intended to pitch our tents. I secured the weatherproof case, tested the infrared sensor, verified the SD card had 64 gigabytes of empty space, then moved deeper into the Pacific Northwest forest to mount the second camera. Something large moved at the edge of the clearing, a shadow too tall and fast to be a deer, vanishing behind the firs before I could track it. I felt a prickle along my neck, the forest suddenly quieter. Wildlife documentation had consumed my weekends for 3 years. I wanted footage of Roosevelt elk, possibly a black bear foraging near the creek. The cameras would capture everything within a 120-foot radius. As I adjusted the camera angle, a twig snapped somewhere just beyond sight. I froze. The sound didn't echo like a deer stepping. It was heavier, deliberate. Was this still a routine documentation trip, or had my pursuit of rare footage put us directly in something's path? The second camera went on a rotting cedar stump near the water trail, angled to cover the narrow footpath leading to the stream. Wet pine and decomposing vegetation filled my nostrils. October fog clung to the Cascade Range undergrowth like cotton gauze. I thought I saw movement in the fog, a hulking shape slipping between the trees, but when I turned, the mist swallowed it. Every few minutes, there was a faint, guttural exhale from deep in the forest, just low enough not to carry. The third camera I mounted 8 feet high on a hemlock overlooking the fire pit area, complete coverage of our campsite. My 3 companions thought my obsession with documentation was excessive, but nobody objected when I spent 20 minutes adjusting angles and testing motion triggers. All the while, a shadow seemed to mirror my movements along the tree line, just beyond clear view, keeping pace but staying hidden. Darrow unpacked his gear first. He stood 6'3" athletic build, always moving with restless energy. He dropped his 70-liter backpack near the stone fire ring and stretched his shoulders. Lennox worked methodically, laying out her equipment on a blue tarp with military precision. Dark hair in a tight braid, efficient movements, no wasted effort. Orin gathered kindling in silence, shorter than Darrow by 5 inches, methodical and quiet. He stacked dry twigs in a pyramidal structure and brushed Douglas fir bark from his palms. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching every placement of their hands, the way the fog swirled unnaturally around the forest floor, as if disturbed by something massive moving just out of sight. I reviewed the initial trail cam footage on my smartphone. The cameras synced to a wireless app that displayed recordings in near real time within a quarter-mile range. The first clips showed our approach. Darrow leading, Lennox second, Orin third, myself bringing up the rear. We looked relaxed, and the footage was crisp. 4 friends entering wilderness for 72 hours. But the next clip felt wrong. The camera had triggered movement at the clearing's eastern edge. The frame showed Darrow in the background unpacking his sleeping bag. In the lower left quadrant, partially obscured by sword ferns, a shadow moved too quickly. Motion blur rendered it unidentifiable, but the proportions disturbed me. Too large for a deer, too low to the ground for a standing human. The shape moved with fluid speed, then vanished behind a cluster of hemlocks in under 2 seconds. I replayed it 4 times. My stomach knotted. Probably an elk. The Olympic Peninsula had massive Roosevelt elk. I pocketed my phone and tried to ignore the unease crawling up my spine. Was denial easier than accepting what the footage was implying? Sunlight disappeared behind the western ridgeline at 6:13 p.m. Shadows stretched across our camp like grasping fingers. We prepared freeze-dried meals over crackling flames while darkness pressed against our small bubble of firelight. Beyond that 10-foot radius of warmth, the forest became an impenetrable wall of black. Wind moved through branches overhead. The creek burbled 200 yards north. An owl called from somewhere in the darkness. But other sounds emerged, a branch snapping to the east, leaves rustling when the wind had stopped. I stared into the tree line, but nothing was visible, just absolute darkness pressing against the fire's glow. I checked the trail cam app again. 2 new clips. One showed Orin walking to his tent, the other captured swaying branches. Nothing else. I scrolled back to the clip with the shadow. I zoomed the grainy footage as far as the app allowed. The shape had a vaguely humanoid outline, broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, arms that hung too low, shoulders too wide for normal human proportions. The image pixelated when I zoomed further. If the camera had limits, what details was it failing to show? Darrow told a story about a disastrous kayaking trip as Lennox added firewood. Orin poked embers with a long stick. I forced myself to participate in camp activities, but my attention kept drifting to the darkness beyond our firelight. Something felt fundamentally wrong about this forest. At 10:15 p.m., we retreated to individual tents. I lay in my sleeping bag, listening to sounds I normally found peaceful. But tonight, every crack, every rustle, every distant animal call felt hostile. Then I heard footsteps. They were heavy, deliberate, and circled our campsite in a wide arc. I unzipped my tent 4 inches and peered through the gap. The fire had reduced to glowing coals. The other 3 tents showed no movement. I saw nothing in the darkness, and the footsteps stopped abruptly. If it wasn't trying to be seen, what was it waiting for? I opened the trail cam app with trembling fingers. The cameras had triggered 11 times in the past 90 minutes. I opened the first clip, which the creek trail camera had captured movement from. A massive shape moved through the frame from right to left, partially obscured by tree trunks, but visible enough to make my breath catch. It moved on 2 legs. The gait was smooth, almost floating. The figure stood at least 7.5 feet tall, broad beyond any human proportions, covered in dark fur that absorbed the infrared light. The creature paused for perhaps half a second. The camera caught a profile that made my blood freeze. A sloped forehead, heavy brow ridge, flat nose, and a massive jaw. Then it glided deeper into the forest without snapping a single branch. This was Bigfoot. I replayed the clip. The silence of its movement was impossible. Something that large should crash through underbrush, break branches, and create noise. The next clip terrified me more. The fire pit camera had triggered. The frame showed dying embers and 3 dark tents. In the background, barely visible behind a thick cedar trunk, a silhouette stood watching. 8 feet tall, completely motionless, and watching our camp. It was watching us sleep. How long had it been standing there before the camera noticed? I wanted to wake the others. I wanted to pack everything and run. But I remained frozen in my sleeping bag, clutching my flashlight, telling myself it was a bear. Bears stood on hind legs. The footage was grainy, with low light distorting proportions. I was seeing things that weren't there. Sleep never came as I listened to every sound with hypervigilant intensity until gray dawn light filtered through my tent fabric. I heard Darrow unzip his tent. I crawled from my sleeping bag and joined him at the cold fire pit. Morning fog reduced visibility to maybe 25 feet. The air temperature hovered around 42 degrees. Darrow rekindled the fire using dry bark and small branches. I didn't mention the trail cam footage. I told myself I needed more evidence before causing panic. Lennox emerged, looking well rested. Orin woke last, stretching outside his tent with mechanical movements. Darrow announced his intention to check the creek for trout. Orin volunteered to accompany him, and Lennox decided to join them. I declined, claiming I needed to check camera functionality. Was I protecting them from panic or abandoning them to something worse? They packed light day packs. Darrow grabbed his collapsible fishing rod. Orin filled 2 water bottles. Lennox pulled on a gray fleece jacket. They headed north toward the creek trail, their forms swallowed by dense fog within seconds. I checked the trail cam app with shaking hands. The cameras had triggered 9 more times overnight. Most clips showed nothing, but one clip made my heart nearly stop. The creek trail camera had captured something crouched behind a massive fallen log. Bigfoot was waiting, watching the path. The Sasquatch was enormous, even in its crouched position. Dark brown fur, almost black in the infrared footage. Arms impossibly long, resting on the log with hands that showed thick fingers tipped with curved claws. The face was partially visible, deep-set eyes that reflected the camera's infrared like an animal's. Flat nose, mouth slightly open, revealing large teeth. Then a scream shattered the morning silence. It came from the creek, high-pitched and terrified, abruptly cut off. I grabbed my flashlight and ran. My boots hammered against the dirt trail as branches whipped my face and arms. Fog made navigation nearly impossible. I shouted Darrow's name and got no response. I called for Orin and Lennox, but only silence answered. I reached the creek at a full sprint. The water ran shallow, maybe 18 inches deep, flowing over smooth river stones. Darrow's fishing rod lay on the muddy bank. The line tangled in cattails. His backpack floated half-submerged 3 feet from shore. But Darrow was gone. How does a man vanish without a struggle, unless the struggle was hopeless? Branches snapped violently to my left, deep in the forest. I turned and saw movement through the fog, a massive shape dragging something heavy through dense underbrush. I ran toward it without thinking. My lungs burned and thorns tore at my clothing. I crashed through a wall of ferns and stumbled into a small clearing. The trail camera near the creek had captured everything. The footage showed Darrow being dragged by his left ankle. His arms flailed uselessly. His legs kicked at nothing. The creature had him in one massive hand, pulling him over jagged rocks and through muddy ground like he weighed nothing. Darrow's face pointed directly at the camera. His mouth opened in a silent scream, eyes wide with absolute terror. His backpack snagged on a low-hanging branch and tore completely free. The creature didn't slow. It yanked Darrow forward with such force that his body lifted off the ground momentarily before slamming against a tree trunk. His arms went limp. The creature paused. It crouched low, breathing heavily through its nose. I could see its back in the footage, impossibly broad, covered in matted dark fur, muscles rippling like steel cables beneath the surface. It turned its head slightly. The camera caught a 3/4 profile. The face was almost human but grotesquely exaggerated. Heavy brow ridge, massive protruding jaw, small dark eyes filled with predatory intelligence. Had my pursuit of proof finally put a face to the legend? And was that face now aware it was being recorded? It resumed dragging Darrow. His unconscious body carved a trench through soft mud and wet leaves. His shirt rode up to his armpits, exposing his bare back. The creature pulled him into a dense thicket of blackberry bushes. Thorns ripped at Darrow's exposed skin. Blood smeared across leaves and branches. The creature showed no concern for the thorns shredding its hands. It simply dragged its prey deeper into the forest with methodical determination. The camera lost visual contact. The clip ended. I stood paralyzed. My mind rejected what my eyes had witnessed. My legs refused commands to move. A low growl rumbled behind me. I turned with agonizing slowness. Bigfoot stood 23 feet away. It was larger than the footage suggested. Easily 8 feet tall, perhaps taller. Shoulders broad enough to span 4 feet. Arms that hung past its knees, ending in hands the size of baseball gloves. The face was a nightmare combination of human and something primordial. The eyes locked onto mine with unmistakable intelligence. It took one deliberate step forward. Did it recognize me as the one who'd been watching it all along? I ran. Pure instinct overrode rational thought. My boots slipped on wet leaves and moss-covered rocks. I crashed through low branches. Thorns shredded my jacket. I heard the creature behind me, heavy footfalls that shook the ground, branches snapping like gunshots. A guttural breathing that sounded almost like words. I didn't look back, and I ran until my lungs felt like they were tearing apart. I ran until I tasted blood in my mouth. Then the sound stopped. I collapsed against a tree, gasping, shaking violently. I had no idea where I was, as the fog obscured everything beyond 10 feet. I pulled out my smartphone, but there was no signal. I opened the trail cam app. The creek camera had captured my escape. The footage showed me sprinting through the frame in absolute panic. Behind me, barely visible through fog, Bigfoot stood completely still, watching, not chasing. Then it turned and walked back into the forest, dragging Darrow's limp body behind it, like a child dragging a stuffed toy. I vomited against the tree. When I could move again, I used the sun's position to navigate. It took 37 minutes to find camp. When I crashed into the clearing, Lennox and Orin sat by the rebuilt fire. Lennox's expression changed instantly when she saw my face. I showed them the footage without speaking. We watched Darrow being dragged into the forest. Lennox's face drained of color. Orin's hands clenched until his knuckles went white. Once they saw the proof, could any of us still pretend this was just a missing person? Lennox started packing her gear immediately. Her movements were frantic, uncoordinated. She kept repeating that we needed to leave right now, immediately. Orin grabbed his backpack and stated he was going to search for Darrow. I grabbed his arm and told him Darrow was gone. We couldn't help him. That thing was still out there. Orin pulled free from my grip. He said he wasn't abandoning Darrow. He walked toward the creek trail with determined strides. Lennox screamed after him, but he didn't stop. He didn't even look back. The fog swallowed him within seconds. Lennox looked at me with eyes filled with tears and terror. We waited by the fire for 43 minutes. Lennox paced in tight circles, checking her watch every few seconds. I monitored the trail cam app obsessively. The cameras had triggered twice since Orin left. Both clips showed empty forest. No sign of Orin, no sign of the Sasquatch. If the cameras saw nothing, was that because Orin was safe, or because he was already gone? Then the app updated with a new clip. I opened it with trembling fingers. The creek trail camera had captured Orin walking north with his backpack. He moved cautiously, head swiveling side to side, clearly searching for Darrow. The clip showed him for 6 seconds before he walked out of frame. The footage ended. I waited for another update, but none came. Lennox stopped pacing and stared at me. I told her we needed to stay at camp. If Orin returned, he'd come here. If we left, we might miss him. The words sounded hollow even as I spoke them. The truth was, I was too terrified to move. Bigfoot was out there in the fog, hunting. We rebuilt the fire until flames reached 3 feet high. We pulled our remaining gear into a tight circle around the fire pit. We sat with our backs to each other, watching the tree line in all directions. The fog began lifting around, but visibility still didn't exceed 60 feet. If it had watched us before, was it watching us now from farther away? The trail cam app updated. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my phone. The camera mounted on the hemlock overlooking our fire pit had triggered, but we were both sitting right here. We hadn't moved. I opened the clip. The footage showed our campsite from above. Lennox and I sat by the fire, our backs together, exactly as we were now. But at the edge of the frame, barely visible behind a massive cedar trunk 70 feet from camp, a silhouette stood watching. Bigfoot had circled back, and it was observing us, studying us. I showed Lennox the footage. Her breathing accelerated into hyperventilation. I told her to slow down and that we needed to stay calm, but my own hands wouldn't stop shaking. The app updated again with a different camera, the one near the creek trail. I opened it with a sense of dread that made my stomach clench. Orin was in the frame, but he wasn't walking anymore. He was on the ground, being dragged backward by both ankles. Bigfoot had him in a two-handed grip, pulling him over a section of creek bank covered in jagged rocks. Had my proof just turned into a death certificate? The Sasquatch dragged him over a boulder the size of a footstool. Orin's spine bent backward at an impossible angle as his body folded over the rock. His hands released the ground. His arms went limp. Bigfoot kept dragging without pausing. It pulled Orin through a shallow section of the creek. Bigfoot emerged on the far bank and continued dragging Orin into dense underbrush. Salal bushes and Oregon grape closed around them. The last frame showed Orin's boot disappearing into the vegetation. I couldn't speak. Lennox took my phone and watched the clip 3 times. When she finished, she made a sound like a wounded animal. She stood up so abruptly, her chair scraped the ground and immediately began grabbing gear, shoving items into her backpack without order or care. I told her we needed a plan, that we couldn't just bolt into the woods. Whatever that thing was, it was fast, stronger than anything I'd ever seen, and far more intelligent than a normal animal. Running without direction would only get us killed. She ignored me. Slinging the half-packed backpack over her shoulder, she started walking south, away from the creek, back toward where we'd entered the forest. I called after her. She walked faster. I grabbed my own gear and followed. Were we fleeing danger or running straight into the blind spot of the cameras? We moved through the trees in terrified silence. Every snapping twig stopped us cold, and every bird call made us flinch. The fog had mostly burned off, but beneath the dense canopy, the forest stayed dark. We could see maybe 90 feet ahead now, nowhere near far enough. We'd traveled about half a mile when Lennox announced she needed to pee. She stepped behind a massive Douglas fir, 20 feet off the trail. I waited, scanning the forest in every direction. A branch snapped behind me. I spun, but all I saw were endless trees and tangled underbrush. Another snap came from my left, and I whirled again, but nothing. The sounds weren't random. They moved around me, deliberate, calculated. I called Lennox's name, but received no answer. I walked toward the Douglas fir, but she wasn't there. Her backpack lay on the ground, its contents spilled. A water bottle, energy bars, a rolled-up jacket. Lennox was gone. How does someone disappear without even time to scream? Then a muffled scream cut through the forest, coming from deeper in, maybe 200 feet away. I ran toward it. My boots pounded the forest floor. I leapt over fallen logs and crashed through ferns. The scream came again, closer now, but abruptly stopped. I burst into a small clearing and froze. I saw fresh drag marks. The underbrush flattened in a clear path leading downhill, and I sprinted after it. The trail cam footage from the fire pit camera captured the attack, though the angle was poor and the range extreme. At the edge of the frame, barely visible, Lennox ran from behind the tree. She didn't make it 3 steps. A massive arm shot from behind a hemlock and yanked her by the hair. Her feet lifted off the ground. She slammed face first into the trunk. The impact registered even through the distant footage. She collapsed. Bigfoot grabbed her ankle and began dragging her. The camera caught only glimpses, a flash of her red jacket, the Sasquatch's broad back, long arms pulling. Her body bounced over roots and rocks. One boot flew off, landing in a patch of ferns, while her free leg kicked weakly. I followed the drag marks downhill. They led toward a shallow ravine approximately 20 feet deep. The ground became loose dirt and scattered shale. I scrambled down the slope, sliding, grabbing at exposed roots to slow my descent. Was I still trying to save her? Or just chasing the truth too late? At the bottom of the ravine, I found Lennox's other boot. It was covered in blood. The drag marks continued along the ravine floor, following a narrow stream bed that was currently dry. I ran along the stream bed, jumping over scattered rocks. The marks led around a bend. What I saw next has replayed in my nightmares every night since. Lennox was being dragged by her wrists now. Bigfoot held both her arms in one massive hand, like a parent dragging a resistant toddler. But the dragging was methodical and purposeful. The Sasquatch would pull Lennox forward 10 feet, then deliberately swing her body sideways into a tree trunk. The impact made a wet thudding sound. Then it would continue dragging. Pull 10 feet, then swing into another tree. The sound of flesh and bone hitting wood echoed through the ravine. I screamed. The word came out primal and incoherent. Bigfoot's head snapped toward me, those intelligent eyes locked onto mine. It released Lennox's wrists. Her body crumpled to the ground like a discarded coat. The creature turned to face me fully. Had my presence finally shifted me from an observer to the next subject of its attention? It took one step forward, then another, moving slowly and deliberately, like it was savoring my fear. I scrambled backward. My boots slipped on loose shale, and I went down hard on my back. The impact knocked the wind from my lungs. Bigfoot covered the distance between us in 3 massive strides. It reached down. I rolled left. Bigfoot's hand slammed into the ground where my chest had been a second earlier. Dirt and rocks exploded outward from the impact. I got to my feet and ran back the way I'd come. My lungs screamed and my legs felt like they were moving through mud. Bigfoot's footsteps thundered behind me. I reached the ravine wall and started climbing. My hands grabbed at roots and rocks. My boots scrabbled for purchase on the loose dirt. I climbed with pure adrenaline-fueled desperation. Bigfoot's breathing sounded directly below me. I didn't look down. I just climbed. My hand caught a thick root and I hauled myself up, scrambling the last few feet without thinking. I threw myself over the edge, hit the ground hard, rolled, and forced myself back to my feet. I kept running. I didn't look back. I ran until the forest blurred and my vision darkened at the edges, until my legs gave out and I slammed into a tree, retching bile onto the leaves. How far can terror carry someone before their body simply gives up? When I could breathe again, I checked my phone. The trail cam app showed a new clip. One of the cameras had somehow captured part of my escape. Am I going in circles? The footage showed me scrambling up the ravine wall. Below me, Bigfoot stood at the base, watching. It made no attempt to follow. It simply watched me climb. When I disappeared over the edge, it turned and walked back toward where Lennox's body lay. The clip ended. I checked the other cameras. The Creek Trail camera had triggered, showing the Sasquatch dragging Lennox by one ankle. Her body was limp. Her face bounced along the ground, leaving a smear of blood on rocks and dirt. Bigfoot dragged her past the camera and deeper into the forest. The direction was north, away from our campsite, away from any trail or path, into the deepest, darkest part of the forest. I was alone. Darrow was gone, Orin was gone, Lennox was gone. I sat with my back against the tree and opened the trail cam app, forcing myself to watch clip after clip. Bigfoot appeared in 17 different recordings from the past 18 hours. It had been there since we arrived, watching, waiting, planning. I forced myself to think. Panic wouldn't save me. I needed a strategy. The creature dragged its victims. That was the pattern. It didn't kill immediately. It took them deeper into the forest to some unknown place. If it caught me, I might have seconds before it dragged me. Could pattern recognition save me where disbelief had doomed the others? It had grabbed Darrow's backpack and Orin's too. If it grabbed mine, maybe I could slip out of it, leave the pack behind, and run. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. I loosened the shoulder straps and adjusted the hip belt so it would release with one quick motion. I made sure I could shrug out of it without thinking. The forest darkened as the canopy thickened overhead. Ancient Douglas firs towered above me, their trunks wider than cars, blotting out what little light remained. The undergrowth closed in, ferns, Oregon grape, devil's club, forcing every step to be deliberate. One misstep would mean death. Then I heard it. A branch snapped behind me, maybe 300 feet back. It was coming. I started running again, legs burning, lungs screaming. I vaulted a fallen log and nearly went down on loose rock, windmilling my arms before catching myself and pushing on. How long before exhaustion made me as easy to take as the others? Behind me, something massive crossed the clearing. Then silence. When I could hear it, I knew where it was. Silence meant it could be anywhere. Behind me, ahead of me, circling. Every shadow became a threat. Every tree trunk could hide 8 feet of muscle and intelligence. The ground began to slope downward, steep and unstable, loose dirt and shale sliding underfoot. A ravine like the one that had nearly killed me earlier. I could try to circle around, but that meant more time, more distance, so I went down. My boots slid immediately. I grabbed exposed roots to control my descent as dirt and rock cascaded around me. Small stones bounced downhill ahead of me like warning shots. I made it 20 feet before my left foot hit moss-covered rock. It shot out from under me, and I went down hard. Sliding, I splashed through shallow water, leapt between boulders, my ankles screaming with every step. Behind me, Bigfoot hit the stream bed, its footfalls thunderous against stone. I could hear it breathing, deep and steady, not even strained. What kind of creature doesn't even tire during a chase like this? The stream curved right. I followed it, forcing my legs to keep moving. Ahead, the trees thinned and light spilled in where the stream widened. I ran for it on pure instinct. Something grabbed my backpack. A massive hand closed around the top strap and yanked. My body snapped backward. My feet left the ground. For a split second, I was weightless, swinging, just like Lennox, just like the others. I wrenched one arm free, then the other. The backpack tore away, and I dropped. I hit the ground hard and rolled as Bigfoot slammed the empty pack into the tree with devastating force. It exploded. Gear flew everywhere. I splashed across the stream and clawed up the opposite bank, my ankle nearly giving out beneath me. I grabbed ferns and roots, hauled myself up, and crested the embankment. And then I saw it. A chain-link fence, 8 feet tall, topped with barbed wire. Beyond it, through the gaps, a service road. Behind me, Bigfoot roared, not the low sound from before, but something raw and furious. I hit the fence and climbed, hands and boots finding the metal automatically. Pain tore through my palms as metal ripped flesh. I didn't let go. I hauled myself up and over as the barbs shredded my jacket and raked my back. I dropped down the other side and hit pavement hard. I stood, bleeding and gasping, and turned. Bigfoot remained on the far side of the fence, staring at me. It didn't climb. It didn't charge. After a moment, it vanished into the trees like smoke. I stood there for 10 seconds, breathing, bleeding, unable to comprehend that I was still alive.